This week on the 77% Street Debate.
You owe us the vaccines.
We can actually develop our own vaccines.
Why is it that there's the prioritization of the vaccine and not the prioritization of other things?
Deal with COVID, but begin to really come up with the plans to address the secondary impacts of the pandemic.
The vaccine is not a silver bullet.
The 77% is back in my home country of Kenya. We're actually in the capital, Nairobi, and we're here to discuss something that's affecting all of us globally. Now, as of 4th August, WHO said that 51.15% of the population in high-income countries has already been vaccinated. Now, compare that to just 1 in 74 people, meaning 1.36% in lower-income countries. Today, we're asking, why does this inequity exist? Who is to blame, and what can we do to change that? I want to begin this conversation by introducing Jacqueline Jerry. She's already smiling because she knows I'm coming to her. But I just wanted you to give us an overview of the situation. We've talked about the staggering difference between the numbers of those vaccinated in high-income countries and in low-income countries. What's the situation in Kenya?
In Kenya, the situation is equally bad. We only have about 2% of the population vaccinated.
All right, let me talk to somebody who actually works for an aid organization. Sean Granville, what is the situation on the ground? Because you're working with these communities at the grassroots.
The fundamental problem for Africa is we don't have the vaccine. It's hoarded in the West, it's held in other countries. If we can get the vaccine, for sure there is the structures and the capacity to distribute, to be prepared. What we then need to do is educate, bring the media, bring the information campaigns so that everybody gets the right information, the relevant information to make informed choices, informed decisions, get vaccinated, and we're on the way.
Patrick Gadara, I want to come to you, a writer, political commentator. Woo! His comments on Twitter, you guys follow him. So what is your view on this? I know you have something very different to say. Are we that helpless as a continent that we have to wait here with our arms folded until those vaccines are in supply?
One of the biggest issues we have is basically we don't see a plan. Government hasn't articulated a plan for how it's going to deal with COVID. And from the very beginning, it's all been a top-down sort of exercise. There has been very little effort in recruiting communities, in talking to people, in making them understand what's going on. So right now we hear there are vaccines, but who's supposed to go for a vaccine? Before they had announced certain priority groups that would be there. And then somehow quietly that was rubbish, that was taken out. We're seeing on Twitter, government officials who are not part of these groups and journalists as well, coming out and saying, I got vaccinated. But when you see people being allowed to skip the line, and then once it collapses, no information that comes out by government to say, all right, now this is what we are doing.
Sean, I wanted to come back to you. Even if we had these vaccines brought in today, the question has always been the infrastructure to distribute them. And there's also been the case where, the vaccines are donated to us, but they're so close to expiration, it's almost impossible to get them to the people who need them. Talk to me about the situation with the people who you're closely working with and the infrastructure that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I think that's fundamentally where the development partners, the UN, have a role to play, right? Is at the last mile. The ones at the very end, the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. If we talk about vaccine equity, you cannot define who gets and who doesn't get by where you are, where you live, where you come from. It should be for everybody.
Yeah.
But to achieve that, that's where those development partners need to contribute to the government plan.
Okay.
To be honest, this is all about a partnership between the civil society, the government and the private sector.
Okay, let me ask what might be a controversial question. Should we then, as Africa, as Kenya, be receiving these vaccines knowing full well we will not be able to distribute them? Are we just wasting?
No, but we will be able to distribute them.
Yeah.
That's not the question. The fundamental issue is the information, all right? And that's fundamentally the role of the media, is to make sure that everybody has the right information.
So let me do a quick spot check. Who among us here has been fully vaccinated? Please raise your hand. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I guess that speaks for itself. Who hasn't been vaccinated and doesn't want to be vaccinated? And doesn't want to be vaccinated. So here we are struggling to get just a little bit of the fraction of the vaccines of the world, and you're saying, not me.
Not me,
Yeah.
for sure not me.
Why not?
But this is my personal opinion.
Yeah, go on.
I think there's too many unknowns about this vaccine. it would be unfair to myself to expose myself to something that actually tells you to get a jab, then a second one, then a second wave comes in, and then you're told, with Powerform Plus, go get a jab, go get a boost. And then all of a sudden there is a delta. No, what is supposed to happen? I go and get now new extra Powerform Plus with enzymes? No.
Let me come to Bright Star. What a name. So you're a fashionista and you're also saying, this vaccine business, not me.
I take time to think through something, and as much as I want to take the vaccine, I was not really informed until I met a doctor who actually explained to me. And if for me as a fashion person, I've not met someone who can explain to me at a personal level for me to understand, what do you take it from the village? The thing is, most people don't have the information. And some people might think that they're spreading the information, but they're not spreading the information because most doctors use very big terms, even in media. So most people cannot even understand what is being said about COVID. And so I think, and even when you ask people, are you vaccinated? They say, in 15 years, I'll not be able to get kids. I want to get kids very much. So what are the long-term effects of this whole thing? And then I feel it was rushed. Vaccines take a long time. I mean, HIV, we've never gotten a vaccine until today. Why is it that it was rushed and then there are so many vaccines until now? So I don't want to rush to make that decision as if I'm protecting myself. And then in future, I cannot get kids. Okay. So there are all those misconceptions.
Okay, and the doctor you're referring to is the one standing next to you, right? Yes. But how does it feel when you hear people saying, look, I don't want to get this jab, and you're in the front lines? I mean, you're part of the distribution program for the region, right? How does that make you feel?
This misinformation is really crazy. It's really crazy to have young individuals who really cannot dissect this information properly. And because if they dissect it properly, they're able to understand exactly what's going on. And that gives them even the zeal, the desire to be part of the program.
Okay, let me come to the biotechnician here because we're hearing a lot of myths about this vaccine. Can you just talk to us about them? Will I be able to get pregnant if I take the vaccine?
Yeah, I think, as you said, there are myths. So what is needed is dispelling the myths, people getting the right information. One of the things we appreciate is that negative information actually, I don't know why it sticks or spreads faster like fire. So what is needed is that kind of communication that synthesizes the information in a way that everyone understands. What we know that it's giving you protection and prevents the risks that are experienced. So the risk of getting the disease are higher than you taking the vaccine. So I could say that as we continue doing the research, yes, getting pregnant, if you can get pregnant over the years, what will happen with your children? That's a lot of research being done. Right now we have the mRNA vaccines that are there. Those ones, we call them messenger RNA, in a way that it doesn't get into your DNA. It doesn't affect your cells. Let me use that, your blood cells.
Yes, you've been accused of using very big words on television.
Yeah, in a way that your body, DNA, at least we understand, all of us, what DNA is. It doesn't affect your DNA, which is what dictates how your genetic makeup is, or what you're made of, or who you are genetically. So if it doesn't affect that, then we should comfortably take this vaccine.
Well, somebody who has clearly thought out how to go about it is Suhail Omar, who works for People's Vaccine. And I know on your website you have a list of demands that you feel that not just government but individuals should take in order to get to, everybody being vaccinated. Talk to us through that.
One of the things we're targeting is government and policymakers. And as African countries, as low-income countries, we've seen this before with AIDS. We had to struggle and we had to go back to the same policies that are the same manufactured policies that are not allowing us to get vaccines. And looking at it on the African continent, just recently, South Africa was given permission to not develop or manufacture vaccines, but to fill vials. That in itself is entrenching and prolonging the pandemic.
Yeah.
As Africans, we do have the capacity to make these vaccines. We do have the resources at the moment in some countries to make these vaccines. The only thing we need is to waive an agreement by the World Trade Organization, and even that is just showing what the international community wants, which is Western hegemony. It wants Africans to live in this bubble where we can't do anything without getting priority or getting permission from our imperial powers.
Yeah, okay. So what did Nanjala call it? Dependency dynamic. Yeah, I want to come back to you because then why isn't it possible for us to make these vaccines? Why is Big Pharma so hell-bent on making sure that Africa doesn't produce its own vaccines?
At the moment, what we are seeing is those who developed, they are holding the patent and copyrights. They are not releasing that. Remember, this is a pandemic, and we are only safe if everyone gets vaccinated. So there needs to be that communication whereby the people who develop the vaccines can let go of the patents, or there has to be some agreement so that we can be able, yes, to replicate what they have produced, but also since I come from KEMRI, one of the things is the research that we've done, which needs to be owned. Our policymakers, our governments need to use that research to facilitate us to go to extra miles to develop even our local vaccines. At the moment, what we are being told, even in Kenya right now, the communication is that fill and finish, where we are just getting vaccines in drums, then we package and then roll out. That's still good enough to cover this moment. But we have data showing that we can actually develop our own vaccines. So governments need to take and believe in the research that we are doing in our countries, in African setup, and then support that and package that. We have the capability, we have the resources, we have the platforms. It's that goodwill that we are lacking.
The government is responsive when there's critical media. They're watching social media. So the more that the young people, the population can begin to make noise, to begin to create the enabling environment where government realizes they need to take responsibility, then hopefully the sooner we begin to see alternative
so let me ask the
solutions.
young people then. So Hal, I want to come to you because this is actually a response that was put on an article that Gadara actually wrote. And somebody says, until an African country builds its vaccine research and production facility from the ground up, we have no moral obligation to demand or talk rubbish about the people extending a helping hand. What do you think about this?
This is very specific because I think at the moment we're not asking for help. A lot of this efficacy trials of the vaccine were done in Kenya. We do have people who are living unvaccinated who took part in the trials in Kilifi. Kilifi is one of the countries that vaccines had to be brought back to Nairobi because these vaccines weren't being taken up.
Yeah.
One of the things we need to understand is we're not begging the Western countries and rather the superpowers and imperial countries to give us the vaccines. We do deserve these vaccines. It's not a matter of please give us the vaccines. It's you used our resources, you used our bodies to get this the efficacy of these vaccines tried on us in countries like Kenya. So we don't want the vaccines at a price. You owe us the vaccines.
Okay, I want to talk about if this situation continues, Gadara. If we're looking at a projected 5 years from now and only 2.5 of the African continent is vaccinated, what are the possible implications of that?
Well, I mean, they are scary to contemplate. I mean, if what happened in places like India or Brazil happens here, you know, I mean, it's going to be quite terrible. But there's one thing I think I need to say. We need to also pull from what we know. You know, vaccine hesitancy, vaccine skepticism is not new. You know, we had the polio vaccine and we had many of the same myths and stuff going around. You know, yet we managed to overcome it. You know, and my point is, we've been here before. We know how to do this. You know, our problem is we are actually not going out there and doing it. And the reason we are not doing it is there has not been a plan articulated to date that says how we are going to do it. So we have many disjointed efforts. You know, I know of, and Suhail knows as well, of citizens sort of getting together to try and pool the information they have about vaccines, because there's nowhere that you can go that's reliable that government is putting it out.
Okay,
you know?
but you know, we've been really focused on vaccines, but I really want to understand how COVID has been affecting your lives so far. And obviously for you, health-wise, emotionally, I can imagine that wasn't a very simple thing to go through.
As a first responder and a volunteer, you're on the ground, you're seeing people and the struggles they are going through. And that's why I say this story of vaccines and what you want Kenyans to worry about, you guys are not at the same level with Mutahi Kagwe at all. People no longer even listen to his briefings because we are done. We need to find money. And imagine that was the first phases of COVID, when we were still doing hand washing campaign, can you hand wash? So, you know, those things. And people lost jobs, people didn't have money. We ended up doing more food distribution because people needed to survive. So if you're going without food, they don't have time for you. So we had to do food. Then we now had to do sanitary pads campaigns and all these young mothers issues and things like that. So the reality on the ground, one, for me, and why the vaccine is not being taken up is as a tradition, we Africans are always not trusting. So we only take polio and all the other things because the generations before us were already taking them. I found my mother took me for the vaccine, I'm okay. So I'll take my children for the vaccine. So for this to maybe fully settle, another generation has to come after us to fully say, oh, COVID vaccine works. Secondly, is because why are we doing measles door to door? And COVID is a pandemic and we are not doing it door to door. Why are we forcing people to leave their homes where we are saying it's not safe, don't be next to someone else? And moving on, then look at the money issue. As a country, there was so much money to do something, and that just went down the drain, and nobody can account for that. And lastly, also in terms of even the politicians, if they model what they want us to be, exactly. So the politicians, on one hand, it's not safe to be out. Tomorrow we're having a political rally.
Yeah.
Someone is showing up at our venue. And of course, all of us, we don't have work. So we'll come. And then, oh, tomorrow there's high rise of COVID in that area. So you're locked down. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
So in terms of modeling and vaccine availability, in fact, I keep saying that the first vaccine batch wouldn't have helped Kenyans, because the health workers themselves needed vaccines for their whole family. So everyone was coming with their relative and everything and making sure the people I know have been covered before I cover you.
Yeah.
So that batch just went like that. So whatever is coming in right now, of course, communication. Make me understand, as someone who lives off 50 shillings a day, which sometimes I don't have, to consider waking up and going to Kenyatta to queue for a vaccine while I have children who haven't eaten at home.
Okay, let me come to Suhail. These knock-on effects that Christine has started articulating, if this situation continues as it is, and Marshall says, you know, I'm waiting for variant 15 in order for me to believe this works, what's going to happen, we've heard economically, to our public health system?
I think one of the things that we need to realize, especially with hesitancy, and to back what he said, hesitancy is manufactured. So for young people especially, or even old people, or even healthcare workers, initially, once the vaccines came, one of the biggest arguments was like, we're not going to give Africans vaccines because they're hesitant. As the African continent, we can't prove that Africans are hesitant. We don't have vaccines to make that assumption.
Yeah.
We can do all the research we want, but realistically, we have no vaccines to prove that Africans are not getting vaccines. And if you go outside, all the vaccination centers always full until the last vial is taken up. And on the question of the public health crisis, our hospitals has taken almost 60 plus years to build to where we are now. Even when COVID ends, our hospitals and public health infrastructures will feel the strain of what's happened, because it'll take a lot of funding, a lot of time, a lot of support, and a lot of capacity to take them where they were before the pandemic. And even at that time, it wasn't we didn't have perfect infrastructure.
All right. So, Sean, I want to come to you because you've written something very interesting regarding one of the unintended consequences of these lockdowns continuing, which is conflict. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, that's to my friend's point over there. All right. This issue has continued to exacerbate the challenges of the poor and the vulnerable. And that's the real situation, that yes, vaccination, all of those things are important, but the real implications around the economic impacts, especially on the poor and the vulnerable, have secondary consequences. So if you're hungry, if you're dissatisfied with your government, if you're dissatisfied, then inevitably you will see a rise in conflict, in community trouble, in
crime,
general crime.
Yeah.
All right, and we can all understand that. Again, fundamentally, the government has to now, writ large, recognize, deal with COVID, but begin to really come up with the plans to address the secondary impacts of the pandemic.
Yeah. So this world that we've created here, this dystopian world where we don't have access to vaccines, at least we don't know when we'll get access to them. Crime is increasing. Our economy is just, I don't even know. Can you imagine living in a world like that and still not wanting to be vaccinated? Bright Star, you're saying no.
No, of course, even I can't imagine this going on for the next even 2 years.
It's stressful, huh?
It's very stressful, and not just for the business world, for everybody. I've not seen my grandparents for over a year because I can't go visit them. But what is the government doing for it, really? I mean, they don't prioritize the conversations about COVID. If you notice, as he said, why is it that there's the prioritization of the vaccine and not the prioritization of other things? So you see, there are political rallies going on. It seems sometimes lockdown is to curb the other party not to have their meetings. You know, it's just like it's political. It's not really about the people. And if they get sick, of course they can afford the oxygen. The normal person can. So it feels like really the top officials don't really care about the law, and that's where the problem lies. And that's where you see even the misinformation. I mean, the government can do anything. When they want to vote, they go door to door. They go educating everyone why you should vote for this and for this. And then I feel for Kenyans, well, they really trust politicians. The other time you saw Raila getting vaccinated, and everyone was like, if Baba has been vaccinated, then let's do it. But as in, I'm just giving an example as to how Kenyans don't even trust the experts, they trust the politicians. But then the politicians go this other way. So Kenyans be like, let us go partying. If you see clubs are full every time because they see their leaders are doing this, let's do that.
Yeah. Are you feeling the same level of frustration, Victor, that she's describing? Can you imagine this, curfews and lockdowns for another 2 years?
Yeah, honestly, I think I'm getting used to it.
You're getting used to it.
Yeah. But soon I'm going to university, and I sort of want to experience the university life.
Yeah.
I don't want to be quarantined all the time. Yeah.
Okay, Marshall, we're saying that if people like you continue to say we won't get vaccinated, we might end up in this situation for another 5 years. How does that make you feel?
In fact, I'm hoping the more we don't take
You're hoping that
yes.
more people won't take vaccines?
Yes, the more we don't take it, the harder the scientists will work, and then you'll come up with a proper vaccine once and for all.
All right, yeah, sure, go on.
I mean, that's quite an interesting observation, and I feel like we might need to have a discussion after this. But we need to understand, like what Gathara was saying, that we need to understand that the vaccine is not a silver bullet, right? It's really important to get the vaccine, right? But the insistence right now, even as young people, is to the government is dysfunctional, right? So what can we do to make them functional, right? We need to shout with our voices, right? So the measures that we had, what we had last year, the insistence on washing your hands, masking up, social distancing, we need to start with that again, right? And bring the conversation slowly up towards now back to the vaccine.
Okay.
If government sees us doing things, then the policymakers might actually want to get in.
All right, I like that because you've started us off on solutions. And Dr. Matoke, I want to come back to you because we heard that, look, Marshall says you need to work harder so that we can get this vaccine. But beyond being vaccinated, what are some of the things that we can do to mitigate the COVID pandemic?
One of the things that is needed is radical decisions from the government, radical evidence-based decisions that bring together people who are experts in these areas, from the hospital treatment, diagnosis, to rollout of the commodities, and also the community people. They have to accept that actually they're not experts in this COVID or pandemic situation, but bring in the experts who understand these areas.
Okay.
And that's the only way our country will move forward.
Gathara, you've been quoted quite a bit in this debate. How do we move forward? What are the solutions?
I'm really angry about is this sense of helplessness, as if we just have to wait to be told. We have the capacity here, we've got the experience, we've dealt with pandemics before. And I think if we go back and look at what we did, what worked, what didn't work, and actually involve communities in this and let communities bring in their resources.
And the experts?
The experts, of course.
Yeah.
And don't forget, we've got 40,000 traditional healers that nobody speaks about, And these are people we can mobilize, even in our own laws, in the Health Act, we've acknowledged that these people are there and are a useful resource. You never hear any mention of them. So let's actually deal with this as a society, bringing in everything we know and the resources we have, and then the priorities that are ours, not ones that are dictated by the discussion that's happening at a global level.
Okay, because of the interest of time, I really want to hear some solutions from Sean.
So I totally agree with
Yeah.
the Doctari,
Everyone
right?
is agreeing with
Everybody's
you.
in agreement.
Yeah.
That, and then I do think it's really important not to forget the secondary impacts of COVID, all right? The economic impacts, the need to re-stimulate economic activities, critical. Otherwise, those who are poor and vulnerable will continue to be in an even worse situation.
Okay, we started with you, Jacqueline. I'd like to conclude with you. What do you think we should be doing on a personal level and also on a governmental level?
I think we need to meet at the middle. The longer we stay in this situation, the longer we close our businesses, the longer our investors stay out of the country, the longer we don't have tourists coming into the country. And if you're not going to take the vaccine, at least make sure that the ones around you are protected. Because then that way, if the numbers go down, then at least we can open up, we can go back to what we used to call normal.
Okay.
So let's meet at the middle. Let's take personal responsibility, starting from ourselves to those around us.
That's a great point to end this discussion.
Yeah.
Starting with your own personal responsibility. I'm certainly going to do that. I hope you do too. Thank you for watching.